Boy, do I have a story for you guys. This is one for the books. I got catfished. Now, what's interesting is it's not exactly my first catfish, but I don't think I've ever experienced a catfish on this level. And what I mean by that is, and please tell me if you relate to this in the comments, I feel like along the years, along the way of using apps, I've encountered many half catfishes or like a quarter catfish. Does this make sense? What I mean by that is the person you met in real life was the person in the photos, but it was like the bootleg version of them. Like that meme, that meme of what you ordered versus how it arrived? That's what I mean. Like the person in person was the 20-pound heavier version of the really fit version you saw in the photos. You met the B grade version of the person, which is not inherently a huge problem if you're still attracted to the person. Here's another weird thing. I have met a couple guys before from apps where the person in the photos was definitely not them, but I was attracted to the person in person. So, whatever, if it's a casual hookup, it is what it is. This experience was different because this person presented themselves completely differently. And on a human psychology level, I find this fascinating. So let's talk about this. So a couple of days ago, I'm minding my own business. It's 8 a.m. I'm about to head out on a run before I start working. And this guy messages me on Grindr, sends me a couple photos, PG rated photos, attractive, polished looking, middle aged man. And his profile says that he's in his mid 40s. His profile was empty, by the way, no details, no nothing, which usually, when somebody has, if you've never used Grindr, the guys who do that are typically discreet, if you get my drift. And his opening message to me was, "Hey, good morning." What did he say? He said, "I'm an all-American DL guy looking for fun," or something like that. And I remember thinking, like, that's kind of a weird way to describe yourself. Like, okay, DL thing, you encounter this on apps, but like to describe yourself as all-American is sort of, I don't know, it felt like virtue signaling or something. Like, who are you trying to impress? Like, when I see you, when I look at you, I will already, we all have our own sort of biases, and like we code people, we scam people when we see them subconsciously. You telling me you're all American, I thought it was kind of strange, but okay, whatever. But the guy in the photos was attractive. So I was like, he doesn't have to be my husband. I responded politely and said, "Good morning. I'm about to head out on a run." And he responded with a very similar message to the first one, where he was repeating again, mask, meaning masculine, mask guy here, DL. And I was like, yeah, I'm closing the app. I'm going out on my run. I got turned off by what again felt like a performative virtue signaling thing. Like, I don't care about all these adjectives of how you self-describe. You're not even giving me basic information about who you are, what you're looking for. I can only do so much now knowing that you're all American. So I stopped responding, right? Because I trusted my instincts of red flag, turned off, performative. Went on my run, went about my day, worked that day. And then the next day, he messaged me again. And this time he was very kind and very polite. How was your day? I was thinking about you. I'm still curious to meet you, blah, blah, blah. And at this point, he sent more photos. And these were all, again, PG photos that showed this is like a polished mid 40s looking guy, good looking guy, handsome guy. But it was the way he communicated that I became more intrigued. Like, he just seemed like a nice, thoughtful person. And it's such a shame that is a rarity on these apps like Grindr, that I would somehow like get hooked by that, I guess. He also sent me an audio message on the app, on Grindr. And I'm a sucker for an audio message, particularly if you have a really nice speaking voice. And he had a really nice speaking voice, a nice, deep, masculine voice, but also it felt like a warm voice, warm, masculine voice. And so then I thought, oh, maybe this guy's just like a little bit awkward, or he's not used to using these apps. But I guess he was telling the truth. If he's telling the truth about the fact that he's masculine, maybe he is all those other things all American, and he just felt the need to self-describe for whatever reason. It's sort of tough to tell with these things. It's like when guys call themselves an alpha male, I find it very performative and oftentimes disingenuous. Like if you have to say that, you're probably not that, right? Less is more kind of thing. But I will say, when I was in Morocco, I made a video about this. I met a guy who described himself as an alpha male, and I was like, oh, here we go. But he kind of was that when I met him. And so then I thought, oh, maybe it's like a language / cultural barrier thing of like some people don't realize they don't need to say that. So then with this guy, right, who's describing himself as an all-American DL guy, I'm like, maybe this guy's just like a little bit awkward. He doesn't know how to go about this because he's actually genuinely discreet or whatever. So here I go, of course, trying to be more open-minded and empathetic. And I feel like that's always what does me in with these situations. So at this point now, I'm getting more intrigued by this person. I'm not like 100% like I definitely want to meet you. To be honest, he wasn't my type, whatever that means. But you know how sometimes you encounter somebody who's like, they're not your type, but they're decent looking, fine, and it's really more the way they engage with you that then you become interested, like just from basic politeness, basic kindness, basic, inquisitive nature. And he probably felt from the dynamic from the back and forth like, oh, I just have to be more like this versus saying the all-American DL shit to this guy. So at this point, I'm getting more and more curious about him. And then the next day, he tried again to get my attention, and he said, I'm leaving tomorrow. I would really like to meet you before I leave. Are you open to that? And I thought, you know what? He's in walking distance. Like, what's the big deal? Let me go meet this guy. Like, I'm curious now to meet him. He asked me what I like to drink. He said that the mini bar at the hotel had everything, liquor, beer, wine, which again is not even a huge selling point, but it's so rare for me. Please tell me if you relate to this. It's so rare for me for a man on an app, especially an app like Grindr, to even have the thoughtfulness, the consideration to be like, can I buy you a drink? Can I offer you a drink? So I thought, I have nothing to lose. Let me go meet this guy. Like now I'm really curious about this guy. So right before I step out to go meet this guy, it's funny how instincts kick in. I said, wait, let me just check with him first, because there's one photo where he looks pretty different from the other photos. There's one photo where he looked objectively much sexier than the others. I thought he was a good looking, like a decent looking guy in every photo, but there's one where he's like kind of a stud. And I'm like, that's kind of unusual that somebody could look so different. Like just way more built and everything in one photo, and just more like vibrant looking in one photo in particular. And so I asked him, I said, hey, your photos are recent, right? And he says, yeah, of course. So I go to meet this guy, and the elevator doors open. And the guy who greets me is the guy in the photos. But just like that meme I was saying, that I was talking about, he's like a very underwhelming version of the guy in the photos. And I'm trying to sort of, in the moment, I'm also having small talk with him. So it's like you're processing, but I'm like, he's a much older version of the photos. It is him, but that one objectively much sexier photo is at best him like 30 years ago. And I even wonder now if maybe it wasn't just like a nephew or a brother or something, because it looked familiar. Like he looked like that guy, but the guy in person it felt like a frail version of the vibrancy of this guy in a photo that looked like he was in his prime. So I'm now engaging in small talk with him, but I'm sort of like, my brain is trying to catch up at the same time. So I'm having one conversation with him, but my brain is having a separate conversation with itself. And as I'm sort of scanning him and trying to be polite and nice, I'm like, there's no way this guy is in his mid 40s. There's just no way. I mean, he's got to be like late 50s at the youngest. Now, I know I have a lot of older gay men who watch my content, by the way, and are loyal subscribers. So I want to make sure this doesn't come off as like an ageist rant. I like older men. I prefer a more mature man, somebody I can learn from, somebody who's more established in life, has more life experience. But the more I was like processing this and thinking about it, and again, in person, he's a decent looking guy, but he's not the person he portrayed himself to be. And speaking of portraying yourself differently, when I was sort of scanning him, it's not that he was effeminate, but he looked like your stereotypical gay white man who lives in like West Hollywood, and who goes to brunch with his gay friends every Sunday. Like there's like that type, that prototype, and he looked exactly like that. Again, nothing wrong with it, but I'm like, there's nothing DL or discreet about this guy. In fact, as we're talking, he told me that the night before he was out with his gay friends, his gay posse or whatever, and I'm thinking, if you were DL, I don't think you would have a gay posse. So my brain is now like, you can do a few things here. I can just be open-minded, have my drink. It's just a drink. He's a nice guy. He's asking me questions. We're engaged in conversation. I can just finish my drink and assess the situation. And if I want to leave, I can leave. So I did just that. I had about half my Corona that he gave me from the mini bar. And as he's talking, and what's also interesting to note is that he had a nervous vibe. And in retrospect, I'm sure my body language was a little bit like rigid, and I wasn't as open or warm as I would have been if I had met the guy exactly like in the photos, right? So he created this dynamic, obviously, by being deceptive. But I just thought it was interesting that he was nervous after like you did all this. So that's what happens. Then it becomes awkward. But I also wanted to be really careful not to be rude or hurt this guy's feelings, particularly when it finally hit me like, oh yeah, this guy's definitely not in his mid 40s. I didn't want to poke or provoke an Achilles heel. I know that the gay loneliness thing, especially at a certain age, is a phenomenon, right? And not just gay. I think a lot of people get older and they grow older alone, and it's an Achilles heel for a lot of people. So I just thought I have to be very careful in how I make my exit here. But at the end of the day, I felt manipulated. So I'm also getting kind of irritated in my brain as I'm having this inner monologue as he keeps chatting away with this small talk of like, oh, well, what do you do in Miami? And how long have you been in Miami? And blah, blah, blah. So I had about half my Corona. And finally, after some awkward small talk, I'm like, listen, I don't think this is the right fit. And he seemed ready for that. Like he didn't seem shocked at all. He said, okay, yeah, it's okay. And I said, I want to be honest with you because I would want somebody to be honest with me. Because I've had moments like this too, where there's a disconnect and you're not sure why, and then you obsess. But I think I also, frankly, wanted to tell this guy, like, this isn't cool for you to do this. So I said to him, the way you presented yourself to me isn't actually how you are in real life. And I purposefully worded it that way to him because I didn't want it to be about a specific thing. It wasn't just the age part. It's the fact that you claim this whole narrative of I'm an all-American DL guy, and you're not that. Like, you lied from start to finish. That's unattractive to someone like me. So I said something along those lines of, from your opening line, I actually stopped responding to you because it felt performative. But then you got my attention through kindness and manners the next day. That's what made me want to meet you. And I think if you were more transparent, you would be more likely to meet the right match for you. But unfortunately now, it doesn't feel right. And in retrospect, that was super audacious of me to be that honest because you don't know how somebody's going to react. But it was also important for me to vocalize that because what he did was screwed up. And I wanted him to realize, like, you're worthy of whatever you want. You're a decent looking guy. It seemed like he was very successful and intelligent. It's like, why are you playing these kind of games of describing yourself a certain way and presenting yourself a certain way? Like, it's just silly. So that was it, shook my hand, thanks for coming by, and I left. So as I walked home, I thought about this whole situation and I was trying to make sense of it. And I just couldn't wrap my head around why somebody would lead with deception. Like, how do you think you're going to get the results you want by basically lying to somebody? Like that seems delusional to me to do that. It's such a turnoff. But then I also thought, I don't know what it's like to be a much older gay man who's presumably lonely and just wants to connect with somebody. I should maybe have more empathy towards an experience that I can't relate to yet. At the same time, I then thought, I get rejected on these apps all the time, all the time. And I still don't feel a need to pretend I'm somebody that I'm not, or to lie about my age, to lie about my weight or whatever. I think it takes a certain kind of person, like a certain kind of personality trait, to be comfortable leading with deception and trying to convince you of their value instead of leading with honesty and vulnerability. But I don't understand how people like that don't get that that's not actually how you connect with people or get somebody to open up to you emotionally, romantically, sexually. And as I'm walking home, I was thinking, I bet you this guy's going to block me. The next time I'm going to open the app, he'll disappear. Because even though I haven't experienced this specific kind of thing, this specific kind of catfishing, I feel like you encounter men like this who are so deeply insecure that it's easier to just, again, lie and pretend something didn't happen. So block, you don't exist anymore. And interestingly, the next time I opened the app, our whole chat was missing. The photos, everything was missing, but there was just one message that said, "Thanks for coming by, stay safe," or something. But the fact that everything else, the chat history was gone, made me realize he must have blocked me and then unblocked me for everything to disappear to then send another message back. I did not respond because I felt like I didn't owe him a response, but I also thought that was a very bizarre series of actions to take. So I didn't respond. And what did he do? He blocked me. Now, in the grand scheme of things, I wasted what? Half an hour? I mean, I spent more time walking over to meet this guy than the time I spent actually talking to him. So it's not really a big deal. But I think the lesson for me is, and I've talked about this on this channel, the importance of trusting your instincts, right? The fact that I had, right before I left, I had this doubt of, what if these photos aren't recent? Like something feels, it almost felt too good to be true that this really polished guy reached out to me and showed me more thoughtfulness that I typically see on apps like Grindr. Like it's like something in me thought, there might be something off here, especially considering those first messages he sent that I was put off by. In retrospect, I realize that he kind of got me hooked by that basic kindness he showed me after. It's sort of sad, right? To think that what made me intrigued to meet this person and ignore that initial instinct of something feels performative here and not totally genuine, that basic kindness and manners through the back and forth the following day, the novelty of that is what made me actually meet him. Like, isn't that kind of pathetic to think about, that it's so rare to talk to a guy on an app who actually shows like basic manners and courtesy, that was enough for me to ignore the basic instinct that I had of, I don't know. Anyway, that's the lesson for me. Let me know in the comments your thoughts. Have you had an experience like this before? What do you make of it? I'll catch you guys next time.